gentlemen, welcome to it.
Good morning to the folks. What up to the youngins and bless up to the world.
And then Jay just put your info on blast like that.
It's what the people want to know, bro. My bad.
Nah, bro. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to it. It is the Morning Shake with me, your host, Xavier and of course, in fact, not of course, because I do not have Mr. J. Paris with me today. However, I do have none other than Miss Leandra Boyson. Say what's up to the people this morning.
Hello. I'm now not J. Paris, as you can clearly see. Well, I hope that you can clearly see that I am not J. Paris. But hello, everybody. Welcome to the Morning Shake. It's a Monday morning. And what a way to start a Monday, Xavier. Top heavy
for real. What a way to start the Monday morning. Listen, man, we're going to be discussing a little bit of a crazy issue. For those of you who have been following the news or been knowing what's been going on in and around the world, you would know that we got a serious issue to discuss today. And we're speaking about what's been going on in Afghanistan. And so if you know what's been going on in Afghanistan, it's so sad. And it's so scary, and at the same time, it's so like, you know, you hope for the best, but you kind of know what's happening, and you don't know where this is going. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where this is really going. And so we want to discuss a little bit of those issues today because the news has been flooded for the past couple of weeks now. In fact, 2-3 weeks now with scenes from Afghanistan of people. Look, if you don't know what's happening, the U.S. is finally calling it a day from the time when 2001 with the 9/11 terrorist attacks happened and Osama bin Laden crashed into the Twin Towers. Well, jihadis crashed into the Twin Towers and with those two hijacked planes, and of course also crashed in other areas in America in fact, I think it was 4 hijacked planes. And since then, President George W. Bush was the president of the country of USA, and he then decided to declare war in pursuit of finding the culprit, which at the time was Osama bin Laden. And so they then said now they're going to go and look for him, and thus began the war that U.S. then began to invade Afghanistan. So they then got involved in the Afghan War. They then got there under different circumstances than what they ended up doing over there. So they went in initially to look for bin Laden. They also went into Iraq initially to look for weapons of mass destruction, which they still have not found 20 years later. And so the question then begs, number one, what were they doing there in the first place? And were they truly looking for bin Laden? Because even though when they found bin Laden, I think 2011 they found him, they still continued to stay in there. However, they are now there because they had to be there because they've now established some sort of democracy, because then they began to stabilize the country against the Taliban, and they then stabilized the country to a certain extent. They pushed the Taliban back. They started, they got a president involved. They started a little bit of a democracy going there. And they managed to regain a little bit of control over the country. And what also then allowed them to do was bring some sort of democracy, bring some sort of Western culture almost into a strong Islamic culture. And it was still a strong Islamic culture, but they started allowing certain things that there was more liberal, as opposed to the strong,
Sharia.
Sharia law. Well, the law, the Islamic law. So they said, okay, look, we're gonna bring in some elements that allows for ladies to have a little bit more, women to have a little bit more, to be a little bit more liberal, to not have to necessarily cover themselves completely with what's the
burqa.
Called? The burqa. To not have to cover themselves necessarily with that. They then also allowed a little bit more of education. They allowed them to study. They allowed them to become doctors, nurses, pilots, news reporters. They really opened it up. And so the Taliban, they were strong extremists in the Sharia law, and they just felt to themselves like, nah, this is not right, and we don't like this. And based on the religious backdrop, they decided, no, we're going to push back. And so what we saw for the past couple of weeks now is the Taliban pushing strongly back against the U.S. In fact, so much so that the U.S. has decided, Biden has decided, no, let's take our army out here. and let's come back home. But that rough kind of extraction really left us with much to be desired, and now we're sitting with issues. And I guess the first issue to kind of toss onto the table here is the issue of women's rights. Do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, so in South Africa, you know that we are celebrating women's rights, and maybe people will be like, yeah, but that's not a South African issue. But I feel like women's rights for South Africa is women's rights for the world. And I think that I live by the philosophy that if one woman does not have rights, the rest of us do not have rights. I think it directly impacts us. And we see that with globalization, it's not too far-fetched. We need to keep an eye out for what's happening right across the globe to see trends and for lessons learned. And so we're going to jump into this, like Xavier was speaking about the women's rights, and under the severity of Taliban rule, and because of the Sharia law and how they implement it, and actually the interpretation of the law by the Taliban, because it's obviously, and it's not just the way they interpret the Quran, but it's also the way they interpret the other Islamic texts. And I think that's what makes it such a contending issue, is because it's open to an extremist's interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, and you know, we always have this conversation when it comes, I'm going to get into the women's rights thing, but we always have this conversation about what it is to take scripture out of context, and we call it eisegesis. You eisegete the text. It's not exegesis. It's not the text within its original context, and that is damaging, and we can see it here. And that's the reason why we always emphasize the fact of stop taking scripture out of context, because there is repercussions. There are extremists. It's like with the apartheid government, you know, they use the Bible to push a mission, but it's an extremist mission. And so when it comes to women's rights specifically, this is the situation that's happening. So I'm just going to get to my notes. So Xavier made me watch this video on, what's that guy's name?
Mads, you're not about Madzilla.
David
Patrick Bet-David.
Patrick Bet-David. So he made me watch this interview that Patrick Bet-David had with one of these with Madzilla. He was he was based in Afghanistan, working there in the early 2000s. So like around about just after the 9/11 attacks, he came a bit later. And this guy said something so significant to him when he asked the interpreter that was helping American soldiers. He asked him, why are you helping us? Why are you not part of the Taliban instead? Why do you not follow these Islamic rules and laws the way that they do? And he mentioned something so significant with regards to women's rights and the power of education and empowering women. He said something so significant, and I think this sets the tone for this women's rights argument. He says that Afghan men cannot fight without the blessings of their mothers, right? And the reason why this is so significant, he says that my mother is literate. She can read and write. So she's not ignorant to just receive and not reason for herself. And the Bible says it clearly that my people perish because of a lack of knowledge. And I think that's the situation. Perishing follows like the destruction of a nation, the destruction of a people happens. The breeding ground for that is lack of knowledge. It's ignorance.
But do you think there's an element of brainwashing happening
Definitely.
there? As far as, okay, you do it the way we tell you to do it.
Most definitely.
You don't have your freedom. You don't have your way of interpreting this thing or seeing this issue.
Yes.
You must do it how we're telling you to do it. And we see that in a lot of countries that are run with those kind of regime mentalities of those mentalities where it's a matter of you do what we tell you to do or else.
Yes.
And like North Korea is run under that dictatorship kind of way.
It's a draconian state.
Yeah, it's like a you do or else. I also know that there was a time when I think Slovakia, it wasn't Slovakia, it was what's this country? Bulgaria was joined with another country. And they somehow got to a place where they were also told that they are only allowed to wear grey clothes or brown clothes.
Yeah.
They could only drive a certain type of car that was manufactured from a certain type of place. And it was the whole idea was to kind of brainwash everyone into believing the same thing and seeing everything in the same way.
Fear is the currency of control.
And even now in North Korea, you're still not allowed to have, even the internet is governed.
Yes.
You can't have Facebook. You can't see what the rest of the world is doing.
Their movement is restricted.
Your movement
it sounds familiar, doesn't it?
It sounds very, very familiar.
Your movement is restricted. You have, what do you call this? Curfews.
Yeah, you have curfews.
That's been going
your
around.
movement is restricted. You kind of dictated to by the mainstream media as to say you do this, you do that, or else.
Yeah.
And it's very like you said earlier,
draconian.
Yeah, that's what it is. And the reason we throw in these kind of thoughts and ideas into the air is because it's not far fetched. We literally in a heartbeat went from a free democracy into very, very similar restrictions.
Definitely.
Under the pretense of COVID's killing people.
Yeah.
Right? Yes,
which
COVID
is in direct conflict to the very fundamentals of democracy.
Exactly.
There's no freedom of speech. There's no basic human rights are being violated.
Yeah.
And you just accept it. And I feel like I want to know, like in situations like this, what were the people doing when these things started? Because it didn't just drop. Like, for instance, the Taliban situation in Afghanistan. Yes, the Taliban was prevalent in the 1980s when they were trying to overthrow Soviet reign in Afghanistan. So this was before the United States entered. And this is how the Taliban came about. It was a group of Mujahideen soldiers, basically, who was actually trained in the USA, which is quite scary to think about, because Osama bin Laden was also part of this group, and he was a leader of it was a CIA-led operation where they were training these guys, jihadists. And Osama bin Laden was part of that group, and so were these Mujahideen guys. And so that is how the Taliban came about. But my thing is, they didn't just come. Like, they didn't one day, the next day we wake up and here they are. It was gradually introduced.
It's conditioning, and you must remember, there's also big propaganda from a media side.
Yes.
That's why even with this whole issue of COVID, I mean, I said this since the beginning of COVID. I said, you have to ask yourself the question, why is there so much money thrown into the marketing of COVID-19? I know we're going a little bit onto COVID-19, but it correlates and it corresponds. There was a lot of marketing involved in COVID-19. Everywhere you switched on, everywhere you looked, everywhere you turned, it was propaganda at its highest. I've never seen propaganda so high ever in my existence.
Yes.
That they're literally shoving a narrative down your throat, even going against your better judgment, even going against your just. You couldn't be free to think for yourself, because if you had to say that, but hold on, I don't agree with A, B, and C.
And that's
you were told to be a conspiracy theorist. You were told to be, you can't do, and there's a danger in that.
Yes.
Because if you all just go with, they say dead fish go with the flow. If we all just go with the flow and not see that there's a narrative behind the propaganda that we've been shoved, that's been kind of thrown at us, we're going to find ourselves not very far-fetched from what these people are finding themselves.
Definitely.
It's not far-fetched at all.
So we're going to get into lessons learned, obviously, and we've already started that conversation, but it's good that we flow like this. But getting back to the women's issue, because let's just cover that quickly. So literacy of women is such a big deal, and we've discussed it in last week's show on the Wednesday warm-up. We had this issue of feminism. Is feminism good or bad for women's rights, right? We're talking about women's rights. The heart of the issue is not feminism. The heart of the issue is women's rights. And I feel like the Western world specifically, because if you look where feminism comes from, it's a Western ideology. The Western world does not have third world problems. So when you want to introduce a third world ideology, a first world ideology into a third world situation, it's not going to work. So that's why my argument was feminism is not bad. But does it serve women's rights in general?
I mean-
Because now there's a thing where people are fighting, and it's a Western thing. Like, you don't have the problems that Afghan women have. Like, Western women don't have the lack of education, the right to education, basic human rights.
you can
don't
apply
have
for
those
college
issues.
and get in.
So when you want to push you want to push the freedom of women being able to live and breathe the way they want to, when it's pushed in the music industry, you can dress the way you want to. That's the least of women's problems
there's even
in a general
there's-
sense.
Yeah, there's even an interview, not the interview, well, a rant that Candace Owens does, where she says, do you think those people and these scenes that we're seeing on TV here are worried about who got a vaccine shot? Or look how they're climbing into their plane, right? They're literally hanging on the steps of the plane.
Falling
She
from
says,
the sky, like you were saying.
Yeah, look, they're shoving into the airplane. And she says, do you think those people are thinking, who has symptoms? Who's wearing a mask?
Sure.
They are literally, if you talk about fighting for your life, they are literally fighting for their lives.
If anybody understands the
literal
divide between life and death,
It's
like, this
them.
is a life and death situation.
And she says, do you think they worried about, that one's not wearing a mask? Ooh, did that one get the vaccine? Ooh, they like, yeah, bruh.
Yes.
I need to get onto this plane.
Yeah.
Or else me and my family. Do you think that mother that is handing her baby, there's scenes of mothers handing their babies
To
over the
strangers.
fence to strangers, bruh, to US Army people to say, please take my child. How do you get to a place in your life where you're handing your baby to a complete stranger to say, just take my child, please, just so that my child can have somehow, somewhere, a better future,
Yes.
just so that they can come out of this situation?
Yeah.
What mother do you know that will give away?
Never.
I mean, I have two
That's
daughters.
the least of our worries.
I have two daughters. I don't even want my children to play outside because there's a car driving past. I'm like, hey, just now this guy drives too fast,
Exactly.
bumps my child. Imagine giving your child away because the situation is so dire
Yes.
that you're even willing to not know what's going to happen
Yeah.
to your child.
It's
just
like
to make
anything
sure.
is better than this.
Anything is better than this at this point. And she even made, it was a smart comment, but she was like, do you think they worried about who's wearing a mask and who's not? Do you think they like, yeah, bro, this is my life that's depending on the situation. I
Yeah.
need to get out here.
Yeah.
And so just to get back to your point there of the first world problems compared to people who really are having life-threatening problems.
Where there's no food in the land, the situation is, like you said, it's dire. So back to the women's issue, the Taliban burned down girls' schools because they are afraid of literate women, like I said to you, because these literate women, like this interpreter said, Howie's mother, she knows the deception of the movement that the Taliban is trying to push, this Sharia laws that they're trying to push. She knows the deception of it, and that is what they're afraid of, because now you see, it's like you were saying that 18-year-olds in Afghanistan, 18-year-old girls do not know the oppression of Taliban reign, where they don't have an education. Because with the introduction of America, so there's pros to this. With the introduction of with the entrance of America into Afghanistan, like you were saying, they wanted to build a more stable government, and they wanted to introduce democracy with the first elected president, and introduce like rights for women and girls
they
and
started bringing
education
some liberal
and stuff.
ideas,
So these girls, they only understand that. Now imagine this. These 18, 19-year-olds, now younger, do not understand what it is. Do not go to schools. Do not. Obviously, there were still restrictions to what they could, in which sectors they could enter into, and that is fighting for women's rights. That, for me, that is, when you talk about fighting for women's rights, these are not just women's rights. These are basic human rights that is being stripped away now from a people who at least enjoyed a tad bit, a little
taste of
bit
it, is something,
of freedom. You know what
And
I'm
so
saying?
now when the Taliban is starting to push their
Yes.
forces, they are now feeling, hey.
We are under
lose
threat.
our rights. Yeah, we're gonna
Exactly.
lose our rights.
So Also, another thing is majority of women in Afghanistan, as it is with a lot of these strong Islamic states, that they are banned from public life. There's many restrictions that I could not even dream of. I am in a privileged situation. You know, me, myself in a country, I feel many a times like I'm marginalized, but it's nothing compared to a woman who is not allowed in public life,
not allowed
per
to
se.
be seen.
In fact, these women
Literally.
cannot even travel without. They're not allowed to travel without the chaperone of a man. You know, so these feminist rights that we spoke about last week on the Wednesday warm up show, when we were saying the beginning of the feminist movement in the 1800s, 1848 to 1920s, where they fought for the right to at least be recognized as a person, you know, an individual. These women in 2021 still do not have those rights. They are banned from public life, which means that, like we were saying, they have to wear the burqa, which is basically fully draped. Yeah, there we go.
I mean, they can't even be seen in public.
They can't even be seen in public.
Even the eyes have to have like a net over it.
Another thing that is so heartbreaking for me, and I don't even want to imagine it, is that young women are being forced now to marry the Taliban fighters.
Yeah.
So we're going back to this underage marriage, forced marriage of a 13-year-old, 12-year-old to this old man. That is women's rights. So
abuse,
running your mouth about trans rights and running your mouth, you don't know half of the things that actual women have to deal with. So that is my argument, and that is why I get so passionate about a conversation like this, is because, like, again, we want to take our privileged position and we want to impose it on a group of people
who have real problems. Now, but here's the question I want to drop onto that. When does ideas become extremists? I can't tell you what I mean by that. Okay? So the Sharia law comes in. They call jihadists extremists.
Yes.
To the point where, okay, these people, we also believe, for example, a Muslim comes and says, okay, we also believe the Quran, we also believe A, B, and C, we also believe, but these guys, they are extremists. They believe to the point where, I mean, I was explaining to you, Offset, earlier, where these guys, their sons returned from war, and they were shooting into the air with a rifle, and they were then brought into a kangaroo court with like 3 Taliban, or 4, I don't know, a bunch of Taliban, like, you
officials.
know, like the way you see them in these like movies and stuff, sitting like under a tree with their outfits and their long beards and stuff, sitting there, and they are now the law. They are the judges, the executors of whatever needs to happen here. So they sit there, and the guy is now sitting in front of the court now. And the 4 of them are sitting there. The guy is sitting on a blanket. They're sitting under a tree. He's sitting on a blanket. And the judge now asks him, the Taliban guy asks him, why did you shoot into the air? He says, no, my son was returning from war, this, that, and the other, and we were celebrating, we shot into the air. Then he goes there into the law and says, this is against the law, according to, you know, whichever law he quotes there. And then he says, now, this guy stands the chance to be beheaded. He stands the chance to be killed. And so the guy is there pleading for his life, for shooting rounds into the air because he was celebrating. So the question now becomes, when does an idea become extreme? Because now you have to ask yourself the question, an idea, like you said earlier, it's introduced subtly, right? And then you get kind of conscientized to the idea, and then later on it becomes almost a law, and then later on it becomes a thing where it's this or else.
Yes.
And we start seeing that, especially with Western ideas being introduced into different places. As much as we can say the Islamic ideas have become extremist, there's also Western ideas being introduced. And later on, it almost becomes if you don't, you do it or else kind of.
And
when does it become extreme?
They guise it with this is basic human rights.
Exactly.
That's what they say. So it's like, but it's complete, like the argument will be, yeah, but you can't compare that to what's happening. It's like basically opposite ends. It's polarized. You can't even compare the two, because with Western ideology, it's about liberation, it's about freedom. We're pushing this. With Islamic, with in this situation in Afghanistan, this extreme Islamic movement or push, it's like that is restrictive. So it's completely opposite. But is it really completely opposite? Because we see how when a certain idea is introduced that's liberated, if you say anything in opposition to that liberated stance,
you get socially beheaded.
Exactly. So is it really that liberating? And liberating for who? That's the question. Liberating for who is being liberated by this? A small group of people that decide that this is the way that we should go, whether that be like wearing masks, whether that be getting vaccinated, or else whether it be not getting vaccinated, or those people who did get vaccinated and what's going to happen to them. It's like we all want to push, like you always mention this, we all want to push for autonomy. But the expense of whose autonomy? Because pushing for autonomy is always at the expense of somebody else's autonomy. So autonomy does not stand within a democracy. You cannot have a democracy with complete autonomy.
You can't.
It does not.
You can't.
Then that becomes
then that becomes a dictatorship.
Dictatorship. It becomes because you dictating to me, I'm dictating to you.
And now we're just dictating to each other.
There needs to be one uniformed voice. Joe Biden now, well, they've coined it the forever war. Now they want to talk about forever peace. I'm sorry, you've already started to introduce. Now, when the pauper hits the fan, you can conveniently flee a country. Those Afghanistan people with a backlog of 250,000 people trying to flee the country, they don't have the luxury to just up and leave.
And that brings us to our next point here. The U.S. compensation to the translators, right? And that conversation that Patrick has with Matt, he says, so here's the scenario, right? And so Matt Zeller is in the army. He's fighting in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. They managed to get an Afghanistan interpreter to kind of walk with them, take them through, because the languages are different, the cultures are different, they don't know the terrain. So it's in the US best interest to get some locals on their side to say that, hey, watch here, this is where these guys operate, this is the language. So if they come into conflict where they now perhaps capture a prisoner or something, these guys can interpret for them, these guys can tell them, oh no, this is what, like you see in the movies, these war movies, where it's like the guy's speaking in Arabic, and then the US guy is standing there with his rifle. What did he say?
Yeah.
And the interpreter says, no, he's saying this, that, and the other. Where's Bin Laden? Where's this, where's that? And the interpreter says, no, he's saying they're there. And so that's how the tactic goes. So Matt Zeller has this interpreter with him.
Yes.
This interpreter there's a sniper on the roof or something happens and boom, shots are fired, things are happening. This interpreter literally puts his life on the line.
And kills two Taliban soldiers.
Of the Taliban soldiers and protects Matt from getting killed.
Yes.
Literally, he puts his life on the line.
Yeah.
He puts his body on the line. Matt is then saved. He gets emotional. He turns to this guy and says, look, if you need anything, if you need compensation, if you need... I
owe you my life, basically.
I literally owe you my life.
Yeah.
The guy says, no problem, I'll let you know if I need anything. Boom, the US Army goes home. Popo hits the fan in Afghanistan. The interpreter calls, somehow finds a way to get in touch with Matt. He says, bro, listen, it's going down. I need to get out here.
Me and my family.
Because they found out that I was an interpreter. They found out that we assisted with A, B, and C. And I got a bounty on my head.
Yeah.
The interpreter then says, is there anything you can do for me? Matt says, look, I'm gonna pull out all the stops to make sure. Luckily, Matt is in a position also where he knows
influence,
where he also knows certain people, and he then gets into contact with Congress, and he then speaks to what's the other guy? Yeah, John McCain. He manages to settle a meeting with John McCain. He gets to John. He says, look, as a US government, we need to help these guys, because when we were on the ground there, these guys helped us. I'm talking about they're literally part of our army.
Yeah.
when they were with us, I mean, they told us where to watch out for, what to do. They interpret for us. They literally, I mean, if you talk about a key part of saving our lives,
Yes.
these guys were it. So we need to be able to do something for it. McCain says, you're right, bro. He mentions what happened in Vietnam. He mentions what happened in that other war.
In
with the
Russia.
US, were also under pressure. He says, look, we have to do something for these guys. They were on our side. We need to be able to support them in some way, shape, or form. McCain then puts through, they then lobbied to put through the Visa Act to say that,
So
look,
it's the special immigration visa program
the
in
special
2009.
immigration visa program to say, look, the people who helped us on the ground, we need to return the favor.
So you need
and
to
we
give them
assist.
special
Exactly. We need to
grace.
give them some sort of grace or
Yes.
some sort of special
Compensation.
compensation because they assisted. He says, let's put through the act. They put through it, they shove it through, they get it signed, they do what they need to do to get this thing moving. Still to be met with US opposition
Eish.
with people, and he says it. He says people who are sitting in their well air conditioned lounges or offices who enjoy the freedoms of not having a bomb go off right next to you, who enjoy the freedoms of getting into your car, driving to the shops without having the worry that you're going to get shot through the head, who enjoy the freedoms of having to wear whatever you want to wear and to wipe wherever you want to wipe and to go to whichever nightclub you want to go to. You enjoy those freedoms. There are people just across the pond
and you
here.
enjoy those freedoms because there's people in those areas that's been
That are
fighting for you
There are
in
people
your well
just
condition.
across the pond who don't enjoy those freedoms. And we as a society, they helped us
Sure.
to survive in their home country.
I mean, after what happened in 9/11, that there's still these people who are already like, you have a xenophobic attitude towards them, but
Towards
they
them.
still risk their lives.
to help save you.
It's like this whole argument of, but it wasn't me. I didn't do it. That 9/11 thing wasn't me. But they took it upon themselves. Like, we feel some sort of responsibility towards you.
So
And it
let's
wasn't
assist.
even them. It was Saudi guys that were majority on that
On
planes
the planes,
that caused the...
And even Bin Laden was from Saudi descent.
Yes.
But here's the thing. He was from a big, rich Saudi family.
Yes.
So here's the thing. So Matt then tries to push through. About a couple of months down the line, the interpreter calls him and says, listen, what's the progress on my thing? He says, I didn't get back to you. He says, no, nobody got back to me. Nobody's saying anything. And I'm hanging on a shoestring here. Make a plan. He says, okay, I'm going to go check what I can do. Goes back, finds that old file was shoved somewhere in a back room and never looked at again. He then finds out there's like 6,000 other people who also applied. He explains it in the interview.
Yeah.
Who also applied. And their files are somewhere there, shoved somewhere where nobody knows, where the sun don't shine. And he then feels a sense of, must not fair. Because yes, you've put it on paper, now we're going to help.
Yes.
But in reality, there's no effort coming from your
Theory
side.
and practice are always in
Exactly.
opposition to each
So-
other.
So, which begs the question then, and you mentioned something earlier where you say that it's nice to say in the comfort of your well air-conditioned office, they this and they that. But on the floor there, bruh, there are people fighting for their life.
Is it not like with the looting situation that we had, if we're going to compare apples with apples, let's say that. Okay, maybe not apples with apples, maybe apples with pineapples. There's still apple in there. But let's say, let's compare apples with pineapples, the looting situation. A lot of people were like, these are thugs. Because where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you? You secure in your home, in your estate with your high walls and
And your 24-hour
your secured
security.
job and stuff like that. Because you are not on the ground. And you don't need to be on the ground in order for you to empathize with people. We're not saying now become poor, go and live in the informal settlements. But the empathy, take time to understand. Listen. There's a situation happening. There's something that's brewing here. I might not be directly affected by it, but somewhere I'm affected by it.
But the thing is, if you naively think that it's not going to affect you in some way, shape, or form, it's naive.
It is.
I tell you why. And we're gonna get into lessons learned and how it affected it, which I think let's go back to it. How does it affect? In fact, the conversation is literally flowing into my next point.
Yeah.
How does it affect the world? Because when you look at 9/11, if you traveled anywhere to any airport before 9/11, you would have been able to walk through without an issue.
Yes.
They would have smiled with you at the gate. They would have stamped your passport, and Bob's your uncle. You're in the country. You're free.
You don't have to get
You
basically
don't have to
undressed.
get undressed. When we traveled for the first time to US in 2008, remember 9/11 happened in 2001.
Yeah.
2008, when we traveled with my family to America, they literally undress you.
Yes.
You take off your shoes, you take off your jacket, you
Your
put it through a
belt.
scan. Clay, you guys traveled with we traveled before.
If your pants is too big for you,
If
well,
it's bad, your pants is gonna fall off. And you literally have to undress at the airport.
Yeah.
You literally have to take off anything and everything you're wearing just so that you can clear customs.
Yeah.
Right? And why am I saying that? Because Osama bin Laden in Saudi Arabia hijacks 4 planes, crash into the Twin Towers, and you think, oh shame, look what happened in America. Okay, now you get onto a plane, you want to go visit your auntie there in Cape Town. Now you have to take off your pants, you have to take off your shoes, you have to take off your hat, you have to literally undress, you get treated like a terrorist, like Candace says, you look like you're going to go visit someone in jail.
It was funny because when we went, you guys were joking about it. You were like, "Well, you look like you can work for Emirates, basically," and it was like a thing for me because my passport picture, I literally look like a Saudi Arabian. I look like a Saudi Arabian. So it's true what you said. That fear is constantly in the back of your head. So when you say like me, a colored woman from South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, I'm sitting and I'm thinking it has no effect on me.
And if you travel and you look Saudi.
When I traveled with you guys, I was poopang. I was so scared.
And the truth is, even my sister, she has that vibe. And whenever we were going somewhere, she'd be singled out, taken to another room, literally again there, undressed, harassed, and whatever the case may be, just so that they can make sure that you're not carrying some sort of bomb or whatever. And here's the thing, whatever the US implements, the reason you have a mask on your chin now is because of the CDC.
Yeah.
The reason we're walking around fearful for our lives because of COVID-19 is because of the CDC. Take away marketing, take away the CDC guidelines, take away all that things, we'd be living free. Right now, there'd be no lockdown, there'd be no curfews, there'd be no restrictions. You'd be at an event every weekend and nothing would have happened to you. But because of the CDC guidelines in the USA, you're now walking around with a mask on your face, paranoid that someone's going to cough on you. You go into a desk and someone... You clear the line. Look, if you want to be the first one in the line, just do this.
It's so true.
And boom, they evacuate the room.
I have literally seen it with my own eyes.
And they're going to help you. Where does that come from? That's propaganda shoved down your throat by mainstream media that propagates from what? From the US CDC. So if you think the decisions they make across the pond does not affect you. Doesn't affect the mere fact that you have a chin on a mask on your chin. Or on your face. Is because of what the US implements.
Definitely.
So these things that happen here, you might be wondering, why are you covering something that's happening? Number one, it's current affairs. Number two, it's what's happening now. Literally, as we're sitting and discussing in studio, there's someone being beheaded and a girl being raped or shot in the head right now as we're sitting here because of what's going on here. You know, and again, it's easy for us to say, oh, you're sitting in, you know, it doesn't affect us. Yes, it does.
It's not your it's not my problem.
It's not my problem. But when it comes full circle, when we look at what just happened with the looting here by us, when we look at what's going on with the unrest in government, even here by us, how the ANC is losing control of the country, how the EFF just decides we're not gonna abide with those rules, we're gonna do our own thing. Yeah, bro, it doesn't take much for us to start becoming an unstable state.
Most definitely. And the thing is, you cannot say it's happening there because a few years ago, I don't know, do you remember that scandal of those twin brothers from South Africa that were part of an extremist group, an Al-Qaeda group from South Africa, Johannesburg? And the reason why I know it, because I know them. Well, I knew them through acquaintances, not like directly friends with them, but I knew them through acquaintances. We used to go to the ice rink and they were there. The ice rink at Northgate. And these brothers were part of an extremist group and they were smuggling weaponry into the country, ammunition and weaponry into the country. So do not tell me that it is not our problem. And it may not necessarily just be an issue of Islamic extremists, because if you look at the situation that happened with the looting, for instance, there were obviously rumors, it was alleged that there was the EFF, Julius Malema grouping was involved somewhere in there, and that they were
Even
allegedly smuggling weaponry into the country, ammunition and so forth. So it might be allegedly, and it might be rumors, and it might be conspiracy theorists, but it's like we always say, do not just dismiss a theory of being a conspiracy. Do not
There
just
could be
dismiss
truth
it.
to yeah. And do you know that just on the weaponry issue, the US, when they left like 20 Humvees. You know those Hummers. They left. Yeah, the all-terrain vehicles. The Taliban broke into where their base was. But they found rockets, those rocket launching guns.
Yeah.
They found like proper new like military equipment. They just left everything there. And now the Taliban has it.
Yeah.
So that now even reaffirms their
And the thing is,
strength.
like this one, I think it was Ben Shapiro that was saying that the Taliban is wealthy because they involved in opium poppies, and they involved in drug trade and mining and stuff. So
70% of the world's opium drug trade
is
is
from them. So they are rich, but
which is another way how it affects the world.
exactly
The drug trade. Yeah.
exactly. But the thing is, they weren't as advanced in terms of their weaponry and technology and their militia as what the US obviously is, because they have like strong, much stronger financial backing and also training and intelligence behind them. But now,
And technology.
with all of this that's happening, and the fact that they've got control of these weaponry and ammunition and blueprints of the USA. And you know, the USA it's a world power. So if anything must happen in the United States, where does that leave the rest of the world? Is there a potential for World War III? These are the questions that are up in the air.
Yeah.
Are we closer to the end
Because now
time
they're saying
war?
Russia stayed,
Russia
stayed in Afghanistan, China stayed in Afghanistan, and they have some sort of coalition with the Taliban. So
And these are strong communist countries with an extremist
if
group.
you think, I'm just gonna toss an idea in there. If you think that even the presence of China's a strong communist country, right? And if you see
Their presence.
their presence here is astounding.
Yes.
Almost every corner is a Chinatown.
One
Almost
of our ministers is Chinese, is she not?
And you
in
must
the ANC?
and look how they even operate in South Africa as far as the Chinese are concerned, right? And the Chinese government is very strong. That's why people are afraid to even say anything or even try to fight or do anything, because they're incredibly strong.
Yes.
If you see how they operate, you go to Chinatown and try to swipe your card and see if it will work. They're going to tell you go draw cash and bring the cash. You know why? Because they avoid the element of tax. They avoid the element. So what does that mean? That means that Chinatown there
That wealth is not coming
making
into the country.
millions per day, and they got a China bank in Sandton,
Yes.
and they export that wealth. What does that do to your currency? It erodes the fiber of your financial well-being inside of your country. So if you think these things are far-fetched and they're not coinciding and they don't relate, they do. You just need to understand how. But they do, and it affects your daily living.
Speaking of that you said that the Americans left their weaponry and basically like when they just fled Afghanistan, there was I think it was Ben Shapiro excuse me, that gave the stats. He says that the Taliban now has more helicopters than a total of 166 countries in the world. More helicopters than a total of 106 countries put together in the world.
The helicopters that the Americans left.
Yes.
So that
Then,
actually just
as a collective.
so that just strengthened their whole entire.
And what is the purpose of the Taliban? They want to establish an Islamic state, world state, they don't just want to stop
And the thing is,
the extremist groups, the
their momentum
Al
is
Qaeda.
moving like you can't believe.
They were saying like a month ago, I was listening to that speech. Joe Biden was like, no, there's no threat. Things are fine. There isn't a situation in Afghanistan. We've got it under control. Within days, the Taliban took over the majority of Afghanistan.
They had 11 airports under the Afghanistan control.
Yes.
And the US had, with Afghanistan government, they had 11 airports under control.
Yes.
When this Papa hit the fan, like you see how they were chasing the plane.
There's only one.
Only one airport. They
The
took
Taliban
the rest.
yep.
They took the rest. And even the one that was left, that one airport that was left, where the people are running so after the plane, climbing on the plane. You know how many people fell out of that plane? They were hanging onto the landing gear of the
Remember
plane.
they were saying, also it was Joe Biden that was saying that this, because one of the reporters asked him in a press conference, don't you see that, do you not think that this is similar to what happened in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War? And he's like, definitely not. The situation is very different than the Vietnam. But it's extremely similar. You look at pictures of history like literally repeating itself. Because the Vietnamese the Vietnamese army, as these Vietnamese people were trying to flee Vietnam, on one of the, I think it was at the US embassy in Vietnam, when they were trying to flee the country, then these Vietnamese extremist soldiers or the opposition came and killed all those people, because they said that they had the situation under control.
So what do we say lessons learned from this whole situation?
So, I want to...
For the rest of the world.
For the rest of the world.
Because we feel like, it's there, it's happening far. And here's another thing, guys. Just because something's happening somewhere else, we mustn't get so comfortable that it doesn't bother us, it doesn't affect us. We can't become so desensitized to other people's... Look, and things are happening here by us also. And rightfully so, we have to also worry about what's going on here. But in general, we can't become desensitized to other people's plight.
And the thing is, we are already so long, we've experienced the effects of globalization for a long time. Your children only know like extreme globalization. They don't know what it is for each country to basically be like an island on their own. No, with globalization, everything is intertwined. Yeah. If your child can order something off of Amazon or Shein, ladies with the clothing, you know what? Don't tell me that we don't know the effects of globalization. And you cannot say that their problem is not my problem, because it's exactly like you said, that if you look at it in a broadest, in its fullness, holistically, and you look at the intricacies of these organizations, you are going to find somewhere within it how it directly affects you, whether it's economically.
Remember that one ship that got stuck in the canal now a couple of months ago? Yes. That thing affected everyone's economies, bro. Because they had, I don't know how many containers on that ship. It was a massive ship.
And there was a backlog.
People's orders, it backlogged, shops had to close.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a main route. So because that ship was stuck in that route, it backlogged all our equipment coming down, even here to us.
Exactly.
So I mean, the world is so intertwined that if something happens or the ship got stuck somewhere in the canal,
and if we go to
you don't have your order that you placed last week.
If we go back to the Bible, and we're going to we spoke about the end times a few weeks ago, and the argument was that, but these things have been happening. Yes, the thing is, we've been living in the end times. Doesn't now mean that it's been happening for a couple of 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever the case may be, that it's not the birthing pains of the actual end times. And isn't the Armageddon war a world war? Like, is it not going to be each and every person is going to be involved in that war? It's going to literally affect everybody. And we're getting closer and closer because the world is becoming smaller. So there is enough space for a world war to happen on a world stage. It's not just going to be territorial anymore. Obviously, the powers that may be, are fighting for territory, but it's going to affect everybody at the end of the day. And so to answer your question, lessons learned, I'd like to start it off with this quote, seeing that we don't have much time left, by John Adams. And John Adams said something so significant. He says that there never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. And for me, that stood out so profoundly, because what like, remember, the reason why America entered Afghanistan in the first place was to push back Taliban influence and to get revenge on bin Laden and the situation that happened at 9/11. But then they started to stay there because the thing that they went for was not there. But they said, okay, well, this is a nice conducive environment, similar to what happened during colonialization. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Where they feel like this is a nice environment for us to influence this community, this country, this culture by democracy. But John Adams says that there was never democracy yet that had not committed suicide. So it might be all hunky-dory, but it goes back to that thing of pushing the goalposts. Because that's what America does in general. Not just in this situation. This is what they do. And I mean, it's not just America. It's a Western ideology. And it's slowly but surely, not even slowly. It's like substantially become a situation like here. We keep shifting the goalposts. It's like you have this idea that, okay, this is what we're going to do. And it's good. It's like what I was saying last week about the feminist movement. You have this idea and it's good because there's a goal in mind. But now everybody, and this is exactly how the Taliban came to be. You know what I'm saying? These extremist groups, the interpretation of the Quran and its holy scriptures and its texts. And that's the same thing that extreme Christians do, extreme Jews do, extremists. You were talking about wildfires too far until it becomes extremist. But this is what's happening. I mean, you even look at the vaccine situation, the people who don't want to vaccinate and the people who do want to vaccinate and who are forcing the vaccination and who are forcing not to get vaccinated. These two groups at war with each other, pushing their own ideologies, not respecting the beliefs of other people or necessarily their fears and their resistance to or their acceptance of. It's like we just keep fighting each other and there's no respect of basic human rights and there's no mutual understanding of, listen, yeah, if you feel safe with me wearing a mask, I will wear a mask. Even if I don't believe that the masks are that effective anyway. Even if I don't believe that the vaccines are that effective anyway. Or even if you believe that the vaccines are effective, or if I believe that the vaccines are effective and Xavier doesn't, for instance, why must we fight each other? Why are we because we are becoming extremists. So much so that a very famous news reporter this morning said that, quite frankly, my patience is running out. And I just feel that those people who don't want to get vaccinated should just be separated from the rest of us. That is your stance. You're supposed to be a neutral voice.
How different is that from what the Taliban is doing?
That is my question. That's my thing.
When does the idea become extreme?
Exactly. Because the very same thing that you're fighting, the oppression that you were fighting for over these years, how is that different? Just because now it's introduced as a matter of life and death, and this is going to save our lives, and you putting our lives at risks, and you going to die because you took the vaccine,
which is scientifically unfounded also. Completely
and the thing is, it's like we think that it's far-fetched and we think that it's not, it doesn't affect us, and obviously it's not the exact situation, but the mechanisms around it
is similar. We got some comments there. I think let's run through the comments quick. And Joe, we need Joe on the show. Like you see how Daniel started jumping onto the other shows from always jumping in and commenting. We need Joe on the show because Joe always brings an opposing view, which is good because you want to have You want to have the conversation. The whole conversation is about having the conversation. So if someone brings a different view, that's what makes the conversation interesting.
Okay, let's get to this. So no, Joe, we do not have a WhatsApp line at the moment. We're not ready for that conversation. I think we are very ready for that conversation, and hence we should be having it because we will forever be not ready for the conversation.
We just need to get into the conversation.
Exactly.
Bump our heads
he says Muslim Sharia law was always an unspoken reality in the Muslim community. Rural Middle Eastern communities have been under that law since the 80s. Okay,
that's true.
That is what we've been saying as well. Afghan needs to fight for the land. America and UN won't come help unless there is resources for them to exploit.
That's also true. That brings us to our last question that I was going to ask. What what is your speculation of what the original reason? Joe, what do you think the original reason was the Americans went in? Because clearly it wasn't for.
But I said to you, I said, okay, so the motivation for entrance in the first place was to go and take revenge on Al Qaeda and find Bin Laden,
take revenge
push
on
back the
9/11.
Taliban,
But now we know that wasn't the
and
case.
they didn't.
So what was the original reason?
But
Was
it's
the
like
oil
you
that
were
they
saying.
found there or heard about? Was there some sort of? Because let's just call a spade a spade, guys. You know America doesn't go there where, like what Joe says, where there's not something.
But
to
like
exploit.
I was saying, is this not similar to colonialization?
It is colonialization.
Because
it's exactly because why the British come here? They found gold, they found diamonds. That's what happened.
And then
in
it's no
Kimberley,
longer yours. It then belongs to them in your land.
in your country. So it's not just one big.
The thing is, do you blame the Taliban for pushing back? That's another thing that you need to ask. It's like with the gang wars. It's about territory. It's about territory. Like there must be a reason for this fighting. And I feel like most wars that is about it. It's most wars. What is the motivation for it? It's for power. And what is power? Money is power.
Let's check because I see Kwazi is also on.
Okay, he says, please guys, let's not talk about 9/11 and Osama. That's tricky subject that we can't use to support this conversation. We most definitely can, and I do disagree with you. Verbatimly, I do not agree with that. We do have to talk about 9/11
because
and
that
Osama
was the
bin Laden.
original
And we
reason
do
they
have
decided.
to exactly. And like we were saying, we've already dealt with that situation when we were saying that you cannot say that we cannot use this to support this conversation. How not? Because, like I was saying to you, the mechanisms around it.
That was under the pretense of going to find Bin Laden was the pretense of the entrance.
And if we don't open our eyes to what's happening worldwide, how are we going to use that as almost like a blueprint for?
But can I ask a question? When and who is ever gonna call America out on their BS? Because it's like they come in under pretense, nah? And then the rest of us sit here and we know, this thing is a rope. But nobody's calling them out, bro. We just kind of go with it. Even with this whole COVID thing. Half of us are sitting here like, wait, man, this thing doesn't sound right. But we just go with it, bro. We just go with it. It's like, guys, somebody has to say something.
Okay, then he says that, no, you guys are wrong for putting EFF and Taliban in the same bracket when speaking about extremists. I'm not sure we were speaking about extremists when we spoke about the EFF. In my recollection of the conversation, we were speaking about how similar patterns are happening. And I was
situation with you said it was speculation.
Yes, I said, and allegedly during this looting, I did not mention that they were extremists because we were talking about what point, how far is too far until you become an extremist.
But I'll say this categorically that the EFF does have
traits of
being extreme.
Yeah, definitely.
They come and kick things and burn things and jump on things. That is, they do have elements of
definitely.
extremism.
I don't think necessarily that we put
not in whichever situation, but overall they do have this strong
the thing is, I wouldn't say we necessarily put them in the same bracket. I think that we can put them in two separate brackets within the same paragraph. If that's what makes you more comfortable, then we can do that.
But they do have traits of intimidation.
Yeah.
They come and intimidate a situation.
Yeah. So then...
Not extreme maybe, but they do come and intimidate.
Yeah, so Kwasi says the new Indian British company and Poppy. Okay, so maybe one of the motivations there. Then he says, what's happening in Afghanistan is nothing but another orchestrated show. Please stop believing the media. It's written Freemasonry all over. Check the symbolism, okay? Then Aldrin says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King said that. Midnight says, snipers in Kabul, Afghan. Snipers, oh no, headshots, snipers. Okay, right, there we go. Nice. The new world, Kwasi says, the new world order.
I'm gonna get Joe in. I see Daniel saying we must get Joe. I told Joe the last time, bro, when it's an interesting topic, come, let's talk. Because I know Joe likes this topic.
Okay, the new world order, the beast, antichrist, world system would be ushered in through orchestrated world events such as famine, wars, pestilences by the world elites, the protocols of the elders of Zion. That's from Kwasi. Daniel says, get Joe in. Joe says, oil, colonialism.
Oh no,
Those
Joe
are-
is saying oil because I asked Mus earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think the original reason was for them to go? Because clearly it was a fugazi. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's an interesting conversation. I told Leandra I got a convo, but I'm not sure if people are gonna be keen on this one because it's very heavy. Like you said when we started, there's a top heavy convo. It's a heavy conversation. But we got into it, and apparently people
And
are
the
keen
thing
on
is, like
the
Joe said in the beginning, that it's a conversation that we're not ready to have, and it's like, there's some truth to that, but for me, I think that it's a conversation. Even if we won't be fully ready. We will never be fully prepared. But this is why the conversation needs to be started, and this is why the Inside Show is here. We don't know all the facts,
But let's
and
have the
also we don't
conversation.
profess to know all the facts, but it is our right to open the conversation, to
And people-
ask questions,
but
because
people-
nobody's asking questions
Yeah, but
anymore.
people have asked me also, why don't you have opposing views? Our whole thing from the beginning was let's have opposing
And we have
views.
invited people to come on.
Let's have maybe some of it is not opposing necessarily, but just to at least poke the conversation, in different ways.
And that's the reason why we open the comment section with the comment section, because we want live interaction. We want people to tell us their views. It's obviously we have
Our
this-
views again. This is my view. That's your view.
Exactly.
And let's have a conversation.
And also the thing is,
I'm not gonna
why are
tell
you
you what.
dictating? Like, this is our studio. You know what I'm saying? Why if you have opposing views, start the podcast then, or create a studio and do the work and put the work into it. Like, the thing is,
That's the thing. I'm keen.
like, our visionary
I'm
didn't
keen on
start
opposing views.
this Dr. Carl
genuinely
Hendricks didn't
keen.
start this thing for us to just have to sit here nicely in the studio and to
And just talk about
nice things. No,
We
there
need
was
to have conversation.
effort and thought put into this conversation, and we always say that the Inside Studio was birthed out of a place of being between a rock and a hard place. We were during a lockdown when this thing started. When Dr. Carl says that, okay, I've had this vision for years, but now's the time to execute, because now's the time that people need to hear.
And we need to have conversation.
Because mainstream media, it's like you were saying, like Kwasi said, mainstream media is pushing an agenda. And remember, a lot of the times you
You
need to
can't just-
question who is funding. Who is funding these? Like, independents, like these studios and the Daily Wire in America and the Young Turks, and the reason why they can say what they want to say is because they're not being funded.
independent, yeah.
They're independent.
They're independent.
And there's a need for it. So I would encourage you, right? If you feel the need, like you've got a story to say, you've got a story to tell,
But if it's going to be just what the mainstream media is saying, then it's pointless, because then
then
just saying what
rather go and
everyone's saying.
apply.
Then go
to-
and be part of whatever the mainstream is doing.
I'm
because
not going to
then-
mention names, but
Yeah,
go
I
and
was
apply.
also
There's
thinking of
very
names, but-
big conglomerates.
But can I
that you can
beg
apply
our
to.
viewers, please, to be independent thinkers?
Yo,
And even with the COVID story, even with the LGBT story, even with this, whatever agenda is being pushed in mainstream media, be an independent thinker. Don't just allow other people's narratives to become your reality. Think for yourself. Check with your own personal convictions.
and
Check
we
with your
always
thoughts.
say, even the things that we say, because we do not claim to
Yes.
know
And
everything.
if
We
you
do not
disagree
profess.
with-
And go and do your own research. All that we're asking you to, we want people to be in. That is our one of our
Reason for
main
yourself,
thing, is to push people to be independent thinkers, to get this culture again, like in the olden days, where you would go and try to figure out the
and
truth
research
behind
something
the
and find the
situation.
truth behind it. Don't just, because here's the truth. Mainstream media is called propaganda. There's a word called propaganda. Do you know the meaning of the word propaganda? Is where you push a narrative and you inject funds into that narrative. You put marketing.
That's how Nazi Germany
Now,
also had their power.
I'm in the marketing industry as well. I understand YouTube, Google advertising, Google AdSense, all this kind of thing. I understand those things. So again, even that's what piqued my interest with the whole COVID thing. Hey, why are they putting so much marketing in this thing? Because
Sure.
do those people, now you need to ask yourself the question, do they really care about my well-being? Are they really so concerned about my health? Because the truth is, if you're saying yes, they are. If they're concerned about your health, go to a hospital and not have medical aid and see if they're worried about your health.
Yeah.
or go be in a situation where you need assistance and you don't have money to back yourself and see if they're really worried about you. And you need to ask. You need to ask this. This world that we're living in, may be scared to ask questions. When did we get to this place where we're scared to ask questions? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Let's have a conversation.
Yes.
If you're wrong, you're wrong.
Let's have a
Let's have a conversation.
conversation.
But let's not be in this world where all the sheep are going here. Let's all just follow. Yeah, everyone is saying this. Let's all just go.
Exactly.
No, whoa. Ask questions.
The thing is, it's like on social media. You know, there's a new law now, like the Instagrams and the Facebook ads and stuff like that, where you need to, well, it's not really new, well, it's fairly new, I'd say, where you have to say whether a post is sponsored. Even on YouTube, you need to say if it's a paid partnership, because obviously your opinion is going to be biased because they are paying you. And that is what propaganda is. It's like, basically, it's just on a broader scale because it's mainstream media. It's government advertisements. So I feel like these mainstream media, they should be legislatively obliged to say sponsored by the Department of what, because this is literally what's happening. It's to sway public. That's what propaganda.
To sway public opinion.
And it's a big push. Like you were saying, it's funded.
It is. And that's the same strategy that, like you said, the Nazi government used that strategy. Even North Korea uses that strategy. They use propaganda to sway public opinion.
Yes.
And when majority of the public believe that this is how it should be, then it silences the voice of truth.
And the thing is, I just want to know, like Joe was saying, it's not, we shouldn't add EFF. And I'm not too sure if Joe is a EFF supporter or if he's just trying to.
No, Joe just likes this conversation.
He just wants to stokes the fire. But basically,
that's what I'm saying. Joe must come. He was on the show before.
Is it not similar to what the EFF does? Like, for instance, even what Trump did, he spoke to a group of people who were feeling oppressed in America, and that's the reason that's how he got his power. You speak to people who have been going through like the working class, and that's how Nazi Germany came about, because Hitler was pushing the idea that the Jews are taking over everything. They are oppressing the Germans. They are oppressing the Aryan race, and we want this pure race. That was the propaganda that was being pushed. And the same thing with apartheid, and the same thing with the civil rights movement in America.
Whatever comes out of those things,
it's always just distraction.
So let's just read quickly the last two comments. Guys, we're way over our time.
Okay. Quasi says, lightning struck the One World Trade City in New York City yesterday. Hectic. Something huge is about to happen. I fear this Afghan situation is nothing but a distraction from what they are preparing to unleash. Also, that is something to consider, because the smoke screens, why are there smoke screens? There's always an issue behind, right? Joe says, iron sharpens iron. Basically, opposing views and points are needed to become a 100%. Thank you so much, Joe. And we do appreciate those opposing views, because literally, Joe's the only one. One of the only people that I know that is an avid follower of the Morning Shake that would actually oppose the views. And we appreciate it, and we gladly accept it. And he says, no, I'm not an EFF. Thank you for clearing that up,
But
Joe.
guys, time is killing us.
Time is up, so Xavier, you call it. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show this morning. It was good to be here.
Thanks for that
yes, and thank you for everybody who was watching. Please share this. Please like. Please subscribe. Please do best. We really do appreciate it, and we appreciate the support. Thank you. From me, Leandra. Goodbye.
Okay. Hey, Joe. It's finished now, bro. Come on to the show next week. We're going to tell you what the topic is. Then pull through, bro. Let's have that convo. At least then you're going to be here to be able to share your views nicely. It's going to be nice. So, guys, thank you so much for watching today's show. This is Current Affairs. What we just spoke about now is literally on the hour. If you type in Afghanistan, you're going to see a new thing coming up from either CNN or from Fox or from Al Jazeera, or wherever. It's literally on the hour development.
To be honest with you, I trust Al Jazeera better than
I also trust Al Jazeera. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe. We have passed our 1,000 subscriber base, and that's looking good. We're excited about that. And also, continue to follow, continue to enjoy every morning show. We do have a show every morning at 9. So tomorrow we'll have another one all the way leading up to Friday. See you on the next show. Love you. Bye-bye. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to it.
Good morning to the folks. What up to the youngins and bless up to the world.
And then Jay just puts your info on blast like that.
It's what the people want to know, bro. My bad.
Nah, bro.